You ever seen a man jump in front of a car and use the momentum from the impact to fly into a burning building and save a child? No? You want to? So making manga for a living is something of a waking nightmare for most of the people that do it, given the obscene work hours, intense competition, constant threat of cancellation, and contract-mandated spine disintegration endemic to the industry. As such, as is the case with most creative fields, more than a few of the people that work in it are some or the other flavor of deranged. And this is a flavor that seeps into every crevice of their work, ensuring that even in the endless ocean of rote, samey, ethically dubious slop that is modern manga releases, there exist strange, wonderful, and truly singular works that the creators made for themselves, first and foremost. And while I'd like to talk about these series in their own dedicated videos, the ones I'm recommending today are all either somewhat early in their publication or aren't the kind of thing I can riff on for that long. But hey, that just means they're low commitment, and we both know your attention span isn't going to be taking on multiple series over 200 chapters anytime soon. Also, quick disclaimer, while the series I'm recommending today are all doing unique and interesting stuff, none of them are what I'd consider, let's say, prime hoe scaring material, if that's what you're hoping for. Since, in spite of my posturing and Fire Punch recommending, I am shonen trash at heart, and as such don't venture as far out of my comfort zone as I probably should. So if you've got a series you think fits the vague set of descriptors I'm calling the theme of this video, let me know. But enough preamble, let the shit show commence! Starting us off is Diasporaiser, which is probably the most standard of the bunch given it's a shonen battle series at its core. But the interesting part comes in with its presentation, as we follow protagonists Nikuzuta and Clearly, who are, respectively, a sorcerer from outer space and an elderly doom guy. Together they travel across the land, subverting the evil plans of Nikuzuta's fellow sorcerers to subjugate mankind. This description, while technically accurate, does absolutely no justice to the metal-as-fuck designs the sorcerers possess. We get robes and scrolls, these guys are dripped out to the nines in steampunk Mongolian armor, using people's faces as teleportation circles, rolling up on Mad Max bikes, it's the stuff of Dracula flow lyrics. And all of this is rendered in these scratchy lines and brush strokes that really sell the feeling of magic being this raw, otherworldly force. Story-wise, the leads have a pretty fun dynamic, with Nikuzuta being a defector from an invading force who, in spite of having the best intentions, has a lot of inherent biases against humans that he actively tries to correct during the journey. Clearly, meanwhile, is this brutal old man, jaded from his decades of fighting off black metal album covers, and finds that over the course of their travels, the wizard of microaggressions has somehow become his moral compass. It's a cool take on the gruff old man and child dynamic, like The Last of Us if Ellie had summoning powers instead of zombie immunity. My only real issue with it is the setting, which I didn't mention is South Africa, and the reason I didn't is that it might as well be set in Japan for all they actually do with it. Seriously, it's like 4 chapters before we even see a black person, it's weird. Maybe they'll explore it more later on, but for now it seems like kind of a waste of potential. Oh, and one more criticism that came up during editing. It got fucking cancelled, because evidently I really know how to pick my video topics. It's still worth checking out for all the reasons I mentioned, but, you know, be warned. But if you wanted something with a more distinctive setting that still retained the appeal of strange, ripped old men, then look no further than Sanda. A series that brings us to a Japan wherein the nation's under 15 population has fallen to just 0.1% in the wake of unspecified climate catastrophes and the untimely demise of the funny fertility man. Consequently, what remains of the country has a collective meltdown, giving it nostalgia goggles so massive and unwieldy that the whole of society is restructured in order to grant children the greatest luxuries with little restriction, while actively spitting on the elderly for having the gall to scent the air medicinal by existing. Our story takes place in the crystallization of this psychotic ethos, a boarding school wherein children are free to do whatever they want with almost no oversight, up to and including murder, resulting in a den of violent, unstable, sociopathic gremlins doing their best to enjoy their golden years before they hit the big 1-5 and are immediately thrown to the wolves. And who could possibly stand up to such a fundamentally warped system, rotten from the ground up and barely holding together in a world with seemingly no hope? That's right, Santa Claus, with his iconic super strength, fire immunity, and ankle ski blades. Did I mention this is by the creator of Beastars? Yeah, Sanda is a lot of things. Most of them unhinged, but all delivered surprisingly digestibly, with world building established largely through natural conversation, offhand comments, and background details. Each one smacking you across the face like a cold, wet stocking. Like the fact that human beings no longer need to sleep, and so children are actively forbidden from doing so, lest they trigger hormone release and accelerate their physical age. It all serves as a really compelling background for what is perhaps one of the strangest and certainly the most literal coming-of-age story I've ever read, as our protagonist Sanda does his damnedest to balance the responsibilities of his holly-jolly alter ego with the mundane stresses of being a stupid hormonal teenager, whose only allies are a borderline sociopath and goth non-binary Ted Kaczynski, as he works to find a missing student and navigate the unknowable maze of extremist ageism that is Daikoku Aigo Academy. All that established, this is still by the daughter of Baki author and pissed tetrahedron architect Keisuke Itagaki, So much like Beastars, there is no shortage of action scenes, each one more bizarre than the last, as Crush Kringle must devise ways to combat children without making them any more traumatized than they already are, a concern that the children do not share. If you liked Beastars, you probably already clicked off the video to check this out. And even if you didn't, hey, Christmas is right around the corner. If I got this out in time. Might as well give it a shot. Wouldn't want to be on the naughty list. Or, maybe you would. But this Santa is in fact 14, so keep that shit in your stocking. But maybe all that's a bit much for you. Fair enough, not everyone has the constitution for gingerbread-flavored creatine. Maybe you're looking for something lighter. And as far as light entertainment goes, few series can compete with the avant-garde majesty of Nick and Lever, which I can only describe as one of the most high-effort, long-term shitposts I have ever witnessed. On the surface, it just seems like a fun, shockingly well-rendered, if simple gag manga about the hijinks of the most American men the author could conjure. Adult Joey Wheeler and Yakuza's Gary Buster Holmes, as they adjust to life in Japan. And while that description's not inaccurate, you'd be shocked how often something so simple is able to catch you off guard. Starting off, you feel like you have a grasp of the formula pretty quick. Nick and/or Lever face a problem and come up with a comedic solution. Got it. But the next chapter, Lever is running late for work and takes a shortcut by vaulting over the fourth wall. Okay, so they're like cartoon characters. That tracks. A lot of chapters feature exaggerated slapstick. It's not like it's weird for the genre, though admittedly the realistic art style does make it a little more uncomfortable than Nichijou. But it feels like there's more to it than that. Chapters that use cartoon logic for their gags will sometimes leave their endings weirdly unresolved. Like for example, this chapter, where they're playing a face matching game and Nick accidentally uses Lever's actual facial features. And this would be a pretty standard Looney Tunes type gag if it was capped off by a one-liner or Lever doing the same to Nick, really anything to maintain the tone and assure us that Lever's fine. But this is the last panel. We just end on this haunting I have no mouth-esque visual. But okay, maybe I'm taking this too seriously. This is obviously meant to be more comedic than unsettling, I'm probably just reading too far into it. But then we get to this chapter, where Nick and Lever fucking die. And again, this kind of thing happens all the time in cartoons, but it's usually in service of or capped off by a joke. Whereas here we just end off on the two succumbing to the elements and gazing up at the pearly gates, accompanied by the kind of tragic, forlorn line you'd expect from an actual serious character death. And then in the next chapter, Lever eats a pedestal fan. So altogether, what you get is a series of short gags occasionally punctuated by pizza tower bullshit and shin kicks of existential dread. Rendered in probably one of the last styles you'd expect for this sort of series. It's not the kind of thing that gets regular audible laughs out of you, but it's got a texture all its own and I rarely have any idea how any given chapter is gonna go. And also any series where a guy jumps in front of a car and uses the momentum from the impact to fly into a burning building and save a child is just kinda automatically an all-time great. It's easily the lowest commitment read out of anything in this video, with most chapters being 2 to 3 fairly text-light pages long. So give it a go if you want to see the platonic ideal of the Americans Japan thinks you are. Also, the author has a Fantia page where he uploads a bunch of additional illustrations for free with an optional $3 donation. So if it changes your life as much as it did mine and you can afford it, show the guy some love. Okay, but what if you don't suffer from crippling ADHD? Not likely if you watch my stuff, but I'm trying to be more inclusive. So this last one, while not the weirdest, is the one I consider to be the least like anything I've covered on this channel, in that I could recommend it to a woman without being ashamed of myself. Well, okay, as ashamed of myself. Because the everyday maintenance of Shinozaki-kun is, for the most part, a pretty chill read, absent of the kind of ambient horniness that makes it so that liking anime and manga will never be fully destigmatized. Mostly. Let's get into that. Shinozaki Yusuke is your average office worker dealing with average problems. You know, getting work done, exhaustion, and a little medical issue caused by his French heritage. Until one day when he's approached at his workplace by a woman and her deformed bird, who inform him that having your head semi-regularly pop off your shoulders like a wine cork is in fact not a normal consequence of puberty. That's not a joke, he thinks no one talks about it because it's embarrassing, and that he is a human repository. Basically a person tricked by a wizard into becoming a personal interdimensional warehouse where the wizard can store all their stuff. Having been transformed by her deceased grandmother, the woman, Yuyake, opts to take responsibility for Shinozaki, thus saving him from being confiscated by the magic IRS. And from this buckshot blast of a beginning, the series actually settles into a much more laid-back groove, as we follow Shinozaki on his daily visits to Yuyake's cafe for maintenance of all the machinery her grandma stashed in his lower intestine. It's less of a traditional narrative and more so a vehicle for the author to explore the world world and characters they've created without any real end goal or central story arc, which would be a point against it if said world and characters weren't really interesting. The Society of Magicians is this weird blend of mundane and bizarre that stays consistently unpredictable. People will talk about things like taxes, health insurance, and regulatory bodies, and then a character will be like, what, you've never heard of the Spaghetti Dragon? What are you, dense? Characters that are just as varied and strange as the world they inhabit, ranging from slightly offbeat to the kind of walking disaster you'd think resided exclusively in Discord servers that presented a threat to national security, none of whom, regardless of their magical talent, are fully aware of exactly how magic works. Meaning that in spite of this whole society being ostensibly regulated, the reality warping nonsense that magic is capable of still regularly causes hijinks that the magic feds have to scramble to contain. Altogether, and in the absence of any overarching conflict, what you get is a series with some of the best vibes I've experienced in a recent manga. A chill exploration of a really interesting world and magic system broken up by bursts of loud, sorcerous nonsense. All while remaining tonally consistent even as it presents the kinds of scenarios and concepts that border on body horror. Like the main character has his body turned into a living briefcase without his knowledge to store some strange old woman's gadgets, which also makes said body subject to taxation. I'd call it a libertarian's worst nightmare if some of the magicians didn't look weirdly young. So if wizards, weirdly euphemistic storage systems, and a cavalcade of some of the most pathetic grown adults you've ever seen sound like your thing, you should try D&D. And also check out the everyday maintenance of Shinozaki-kun. And that's about all I got. Sorry, the editing wasn't as intricate as usual. I'm trying out different formats, by which I mean formats that take less than 2 months and a mental breakdown to finish and yield more than 6 minutes of video on average. Might cover a couple of these in more detail later down the line if there's interest in it, so let me know if that sounds like something you guys would be into, and don't jump into oncoming traffic. Have a nice day.